Hey there, friends and family. Cowboy Steve here. I'm incognito at a random, undisclosed location because today we're going to talk about classified documents and security clearances. I want to make sure that none of the three-letter agencies are going to pop in unexpectedly. Is that a drone? Anyway, I'm definitely not anywhere on the Ohio River when there's... shit.
Is the arrest of the 21-year-old by the FBI. His name is Jack Teixeira.
Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira.
The arrest in North Dayton, Massachusetts, of 21-year-old Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira. Allegedly, he had information on Israel, South Korea, the war in Ukraine, classified documents reportedly ranging from intelligence information on Ukrainian military positions, international support for Ukraine, the state of the war, various sensitive topics like under what conditions might President Putin use nuclear weapons.
So here he is at 21 years old. He's kind of the senior guy in the group. Here's what he does. He holds the highest level security clearance. Why? Because he's in charge of keeping up communications in his unit. So among the young men in the chat room, this is, by the way, he formed it and named it Thug Shaker Central. His nickname was OG. Now he faces charges of the espionage attack. It damaged our relationship with South Korea, damaged our relationship with Israel, damaged our relationship with the UAE, and also the way we do operations with Russia and with China. To be able to listen into Russian intel and the turbulence that they have at the highest level.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of Loft Talk. Now obviously, I'm not in my loft. We're on the road in an undisclosed... Alright, we're in Southern Ohio, on the Ohio River. And today's video is going to be about a semi-serious topic, and that is security clearances and classified documents. Now, I haven't made my video yet that establishes my credibility as a Navy intelligence analyst. I was an intelligence specialist in the late 80s. So I have some exposure to all of what I'm going to be talking about. Now, first off, classifications haven't changed a whole lot since the 80s, as far as I can tell. There are multiple classifications or levels of security assigned to documentation and intelligence. The basic level is unclassified. Basically, that means there's nothing in there of any sensitivity. It might also be tagged as for official use only. That's still not technically classified. The next level of classification is confidential, and that has the loosest security controls or restrictions on it. Next comes secret. The safety protocols are a little stronger, a little more limited access, and the sensitivity of the information is a little higher. Next is top secret. Ooh, yes, top secret. That is the stuff that we're trying to maintain the tight control on. Stuff that would be damaging to national security or possibly a source placed somewhere if it was to be released, especially to our adversaries. That covers the basic security classifications. Now let's talk about security markings. There is a whole slew of security markings which are for further controlling the distribution of unclassified and classified information. For my purposes today, I'm going to concentrate on one, SCISI. SCISI stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Special Intelligence. It is based on intelligence information that requires appropriate protection with a specific control system. Just like the name implies, it's broken up into compartments, and you have to be cleared for the individual compartments. Just because you have a top secret SCI clearance doesn't mean you get access to all of those different individual compartments or programs. You're only briefed into those that you have a need to know or are required to have access to do your job. So for instance, there might be top secret SCI codenamed River, or picnic table, or shelter. And just because I was briefed into and cleared for SCI River doesn't mean I automatically had access to picnic table and shelter. The media has been beating up the intelligence community because a 21-year-old kid had access to SCI material, and they didn't understand why somebody that young would have that access. Now, I'm not going to get into whether he should have had access based on his role with the Massachusetts National Guard or whatever it was he was attached to. But I will say that it is not unusual by any stretch of the imagination for 19, 20, 21-year-old kids to have access to SCI materials. I received my SCI clearance access when I was 19 years old, not long after I had left A school. And shout out to anybody that went to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado, and the Armed Forces Air Intelligence Training Command. I had need for access to SCI materials because of my role as working in the N2 or intelligence department of a deployed battle group command staff known as Commander Cruiser Destroyer Group 8. Whenever a battle group would deploy overseas, especially carrier battle groups, there was always either a Commander Cruiser Destroyer Group 8 level staff or a Commander Carrier Group level staff that was basically in charge of the battle group. The flagship was usually always the carrier, and for those of you in the military, N2 was intelligence, N3 was operations, N1 was admin, such and such. I reported to my command, which was Com Crew Desir 8, and we very shortly thereafter left on a Mediterranean cruise. It wasn't long after we deployed that it came through that I was passed all the background checks, and I immediately was granted access to one or two of the programs that followed under the classification of SCI. People, when they find out I worked in intelligence as an analyst, and I was an operational intelligence analyst, I wasn't a Jack Ryan in a building with no windows doing high-level analysis. Mine was pretty much just the Mediterranean area Soviet fleet and fleet operations. Also some terrorism stuff all doing with Libya, just things like that. It's stuff from the mid to late 80s. But anyway, a lot of times people will find out I worked in intelligence and they think, ooh, you must have seen some really cool James Bond type stuff. And I hate to tell you this, but the overwhelming majority of classified information is to protect the source, not that it's such spectacular information. In other words, if the information were to get back to, let's say, the Soviets, they might be able to figure out where that information came from just based on who had access to that information. For instance, let's say we had a report on what Gorbachev had for breakfast that morning, and we received a report on that. Well, if that information got back to the Russians, they could very easily see who had access to the information of what Gorbachev had for breakfast that day. It also was to protect the abilities and the capabilities of our national sensors, whether it be satellites, maybe ground-based intelligence collection. There might be protecting the capabilities of, let's say, sonar equipment or signal intelligence capturing capabilities. For instance, a plane that would fly in the Mediterranean that all they did was listen to frequencies that were used by, say, Libya or Egypt or other ones, and they had linguists on board. There were rulings for Russian linguists and Arlings for Arabic linguists and different kinds of linguists that just basically listened to everything that was going on that wasn't coded. So as a 19-year-old kid who was just moving from E3 to E4 and access to SCI information, believe you me, I know what the consequences would be if I leaked any of that information. Now, we had pretty tight control of this stuff back in the late 80s. Not that they don't now, but we didn't have all the digital technologies in the late 80s that they do now. So the overwhelming majority of our classified information and message traffic was on paper. It would come into the radio room on the ship, Crippy Spaces, the cryptologists, the CTs. The messages would come in, get decoded, printed out, and then would be distributed to those who needed it. Now, SCI material was always on blue paper, and it had to be signed for. In other words, there was a chain of custody from the time you picked it up to the time it was destroyed. There had to be accountability. And for SCI stuff, anytime we destroyed it, we had 2 witnesses. So it would always be myself and one other person that would sign off that the documents were destroyed. It's a lot different world out there now. All kinds of digital technologies that were inconceivable in the late 80s has to make it a nightmare to try to keep track of this information. But basically, the point I'm getting to in all this is the majority of the people in the military are young people, 18 to 26-year-olds. So of course they're going to have access to highly classified information. We're not a conscription service. People volunteer to go into the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Army. And as such, you are trained and given certain levels of responsibility as you progress through the ranks and as you demonstrate that you can handle the responsibilities. For me, as a 19-year-old kid, having access to top secret SCI or SI material, that was normal. There were a lot of people my age that had access to that kind of information. But we had signed a non-disclosure agreement and understood that the penalties would be severe if we lacked in our security protocols to protect that information. So I think the press and the media are emphasizing the wrong things when they're saying this was a 21-year-old kid that had access to all this information and blah, 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 blah. Been like that for 50 years at least, maybe longer. It's just the normal use of the information. Why this particular person in his position had access to a bunch of different SCI compartments or individual programs, I don't know. That's not something we're probably ever really going to know unless the military decides to let us know. But I think what the media needs to do is start emphasizing on why this kid decided that he wanted to share this information with his buddies. Maybe it was a look at me complex, look how important I am. I have access to all this information. It might be something as simple as that. Do I think that he was being coaxed or had been recruited by some foreign intelligence service? No. I think he just wanted to show how important he was to his gaming buddies. It's like, hey guys, look at all this cool stuff they're doing over in Ukraine. Look at what our involvement is over in Ukraine. Or I'm not sure what other things that he might have touched on. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Loft Talk. It's kind of relevant to current events. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.